So we've obviously been covering here a lot of the polls on the national presidential race and in key battleground states and also some of the key Senate races. But there are a number of ballot initiatives that also will be really significant on the ballot next week. One in particular that caught my eye is in the state of Florida. Obviously, Florida is the swingiest of swing states, and one of the provisions that they will be able to vote for on the ballot is raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. This would happen over time until 2026 when it would hit that $15 an hour mark. And you can see here from these numbers, this provision is overwhelmingly popular. Okay, so you can 70% statewide say yes, $15 an hour, only 21% disagree. So this is really, to me, underscores, Saagar, and why I wanted to highlight this, how out of step the national conversation is with where people actually are. I found another poll from last year, 2/3 of Americans nationwide favor raising the minimum wage. We've seen minimum wage hikes pass in ballot initiatives in deeply red states. This is incredibly popular, and number one, populist President Donald Trump doesn't support it, which is different from his previous position, something we highlighted from the last debate. It shows his evolution into, sadly, like a really normal, conventional Paul Ryan type Republican. But second of all, Joe Biden is given a lot of credit for backing a $15 minimum wage, which I'm glad that he does. We'll see if he actually fights for that in Congress. But if he didn't, it would be crazy. This is extremely popular. Even in like really conservative states, it's really, really popular. So the idea that, for our politicians to embrace this at this point takes any kind of courage is also a little bit absurd.
Yeah, I was actually just looking here. So the current minimum wage is $8.56 an hour. So this would raise it to $10 per hour. So it's not even $15 minimum wage. But it's interesting to look at the polling on this, and it tracks with what we were talking about yesterday about Hispanic vote, because Florida, as we've talked about, is probably the most likely of the battleground states to actually go Trump. And one of the reasons for that is that they will by the way, it will reach $15 minimum wage in 2026. It's just immediate.
Gradual increase.
It's a gradual increase, just to be clear. But one of the things that's very key about this reporting is that you could have a state which could go Trump, overwhelmingly support an increase to $15 minimum wage, and this is just how a lot of people vote. We don't know how to track our current positions onto much of the electorate. People who are pro-life, pro-gun, pro-Medicare for all, and like fight for 20,
right?
Or something like. People are like, what? Like, who is this person?
That's a lot of people.
That's actually a lot of people in this country, and nobody ever gets to talk about that.
They have zero representation.
Yeah,
zero. I mean, really, like, you can't name a single politician in D.C. who supports that mix of positions. And yet, I wouldn't say that it's a majority that supports that ballot, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's also a commentary on like what we describe as centrist versus radical, because this would be described as like a really progressive or like maybe even a radical position. $15 an hour, even, and maybe if you start to get up to 20 or 25, maybe those numbers start to shrink. But the idea that $15 an hour or healthcare for all, which is also incredibly popular, or a massive stimulus, for example, which is supported by 70% of people, or universal affordable health, child care, which is supported by 70-some% of people, or free college, which is also supported by 70% of people, like, if you're talking about the mainstream of American position, those economic positions are all the mainstream of American consensus opinion. So when you're thinking about like what is centrist and what's described as extreme, it's way out of whack on economics with how the American people actually feel about these items.
Totally. It's just so interesting. Hope it passes. We'll see.
Looks likely.
Yeah.
More Rising for you after this.